As above, so below. Our planet formed 4.5 billion years ago, as it says right there. And unicellular life began a billion years after that. So 3.5 billion years ago, our single cell life began. And that isolated speck of life mirrored itself. One became two, and that process continued, multiplicity through complex interrelationships, eventually forming all of life as we know it. That repeating pattern that is called autopoiesis, self generation, the divine mystery of existence, this ever unfolding creative process where the single cell duplicates itself, perfect mirror image. It made me wonder, why did it do that? Why did it ever do that? So, spiritually, where is my mirrored other half? And when will it return to me? This presentation will not delve into that level of longing. A very, very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us for our 76th presentation. The Nourishment Projects is about joyous curiosity and being part of something much larger than ourselves. Here are some of the references that inform this presentation. Beginnings of life. This one particular life rules mine. When an infant, I'd put my son on a large mirror. And this is the moment at which where he saw his reflection. Now, I don't know if he recognized himself, but look at that sense of wonder. You can tell he probably sensed, ooh, what's this? And the joy on his face when he looked up at me and he shared wordlessly, something like, look, Ma, do you see what I see? So the word for mirror, mirari, is to wonder. Look at that. To gaze in wonderment at self, besotted, illuminated with love. That sense of let me look at you. And that sense, spiritually and in real life, is dependent on light, both for the mirror and for the moon, because both the mirror and the moon are two objects that are absolutely dependent on light. And they are both psychologically linked. It evokes emotions. In terms of the mirror, we start with self-reflection. And in the better sense, hopefully introspection. And if there's enough insight, to a moment of inflection where we transcend from thinking about things like who am I to more subtle aspects of what am I? And that wisdom really is in the eye of the beholder. It's not the object, it's not the mirror. The mirror does not bestow that transcendence. Because sometimes the beast will walk right past the mirror and ignore it completely, or if not outright get aggressive. So far from introspection, the animal will sense like an enemy and hate its own reflection, its own self, and become extremely aggressive. And people do that too. But sometimes also there is curiosity. And as in the Greek mythology, that sense of wonder that one thought, one sees, or I firmly see in the character of Narcissus, a character that I feel personally has been unfairly maligned I think he's a victim of others' jealousies. Because born utterly beautiful, he was coveted by the gods, the nymphs, and the humans. And Narcissus was a wonder to behold. And when his mother, Liriope, had asked the blind prophet Tiresias about her son's fate, she was told that Narcissus would live a long life if he does not know himself. It was a double take, not know thyself. As long as he doesn't know himself, he will live a long time. Well, around the age of 16, up to that point, Narcissus was indifferent to all affections because he was beloved by Apollo, he was beloved by many. He was indifferent to all affections until he saw his reflection, his own reflection in a pool. And at that moment, Narcissus fell in love. So goes that well known tale about Narcissus. To get his mirrored soul, apparently, he fell into the water and drowned. In one version, the nymph Echo, she was hurt that he did not reciprocate her feelings, and as a result, scorned, she had cursed him, that may he never too obtain his love. Isn't it ironic that Echo is metaphorically an audio mirror? Because an echo is a reflection also. So echo is a reflection just like a mirror. In another version of the story of Narcissus, it is stated that Narcissus had a twin sister whom he loved. She had died, and in his own reflection, he saw the face of his beloved twin, pined for her, and died. So, in most senses, psychologically, narcissism is a pejorative. And I think that's such a malignment. Just because someone, or perhaps hordes of people, love you, why are you obligated to love them back? Love is a mystery. What is it that I get the most love from you, so I will love you back until the next best lover come along? This concept of, upgrade. No, love is not a transaction. So if you think about it, Narcissus didn't go around seducing the gods or the nymphs or Echo or anyone. He was absolutely satisfied in himself. If you ignore that story about his sister, because there's so many stories coming up, because Echo felt scorn, her ignorant jealousy made Echo curse him and eventually caused his death. Who was at fault? Certainly not him. That he looked in the mirror and I was happy in wonderment without disturbing anyone else. He left others alone. Why was he punished for that? Because that, looking at self, is vastly different than the vanity that preens and demands, watch me, give me attention, give me millions of like on all these social media platforms. This amount of looking at self is entirely different from that isolated, introspective gazing with harmless adoration in the sense of, who are you, my love? I just don't get that story at all. I think it's so misinterpreted. Because if you do want that pejorative narcissism that they talk about, self-absorbed, behold Albert Dürer, the German artist. His self-portrait, modeled on the Byzantine image of Christ Pantocrator, the all-powerful. His other portrait, I mean, look at it. It screams, look at me seducing from the canvas. Look at my refined clothes. Look deeply at my fancy white gloves. Why am I showing this? All these self-portraits dependent on mirrors. And from the German Dürer to the Dutch Rembrandt. Here he is capturing his own face mid-laughter. And this was a clever marketing strategy that not only demonstrated his precocious talent, because Rembrandt was talented from a young age, but it also revealed Rembrandt to be playful and a confident character who would be easy to work with his clients, because this is marketing for himself. And we see 2 years later, he sees himself in the mirror as a youthful, plump-skinned, wild, unruly-haired child. I mean, he's barely 23. The year after that, look at the difference. What does he see when he now looks at the mirror? An unidealized, honest-mannered, unafraid to make himself look ridiculous. Makes you think, what kind of a client is he looking for now? And now the artist Rembrandt oozes a cool air of confidence. Why is that? Because by this time, he's married to the wealthy Saskia. He has set up an independent studio in Amsterdam from where he earns large-scale commissions with many, many wealthy clients. What do you think he now sees when he looks in the mirror for these self-portraits? He self-stages this portrait, and this portrait is based on a 1512 painting by Titian. And so that tells you that he views himself in the same vein as his great Italian forefather, Titian. And now, life that you see here is when his wealth has been squandered. This is the grief after he's lost his beloved wife. I think she died around 1642 or something. What does this man now behold when he tries to capture himself on canvas? Can you imagine sitting hours looking at a mirror? The humane quality of self-acceptance. This is evident in one of his finest, and I think one of his last portraits. Wrinkles, paled, puffy skin. There's a brutal, direct honesty because the artist is entirely bare. And it makes you wonder, what does he behold now? Life spent, because he dies very soon after this, though I doubt he knew it. What do you think I see? Through all of this, all I am thinking is, where is he getting his mirror from? Mirrors aren't cheap. Because when he started off, before he married into wealth, how did he get a private mirror in 1628? Because you see, even almost 60 years after that, in 1684, mirrors remained one of the costliest objects. It was the domain of the wealthy, the royalty across the geography of Europe. Where on earth would a poor Rembrandt get his mirror from? In this painting of Velasquez's Las Meninas, you can decipher this painting in so many ways, but in a simple way, what it is showing is how monarchy views the world. Because the king and the queen, I'm going to point now, they're reflected in the painting in that bright mirror in the back of this deep, high room. They and the infanta, which is like the queen, they've been dwarfed by the others in the front, by the dwarf and the dog and everything else. Mirror again, Jan van Eyck's painting, Arnolfini Marriage. There in the back, it shows a convex round mirror on the back wall. In this case, it's reflecting the backs of the subjects of the artist, the married couple. Now, portrait commissions are there to show wealth. Objects are very carefully included to demonstrate power. So the inclusion of a mirror was as much a sign of opulence as artistic finesse. Mirror paintings, however, take on an entirely different perspective in China during the Song culture. So this is around 10th century. And so this is preceding Jan van Eyck's paintings, mirror paintings, by almost 400 years. So this painting by an anonymous artist is titled One or Two, and it is psychologically brilliant. The mirror here is this scroll, this painting, the portrait within the painting. But look carefully. Though the seated gentleman, which is shown here, and the portrait of him, his picture, are wearing the same clothing and have the same beard, their facial features and expressions are quite different. It's kind of hazy to see, but it wouldn't photograph well. But if you take a magnifying glass and look, you will see that the seated gentleman in the painting has a more rounder face with a slightly more gentle countenance, while his portrait, the hanging scroll, is looking severely, almost scowling. So when you pair that in the composition, the hanging scroll painting is inspecting critically his own model in real life. So the latter, this seated man, is utterly unaware of the inquisitor's gaze from above, from his own self. So it's a reverse view of life through a psychological mirror. Observation. Talk about intelligent artwork. Not quite, but the idea is the same of mirror, mirror on the wall. Or Lewis Carroll's famed mirror, mounted on a mantelpiece, and Alice steps into a silvery mist on this side. When she slips through as if she were moving through liquid and she comes out the other way. John Tenniel is one of the more famous drawings of it. There were better looking ones, but I figured let's stick with the originals. And in the book, she had declared, "Oh, what fun it'll be when they see me through the glass in here and can't get at me." One sees such mantelpiece mirrors in the charming miniatures in the Art Institute of Chicago in the Thorn Room. I mean, look at the details they put in. Here is the mantelpiece mirror, and it's reflecting the light. So very French, so very Louis XIV. As does the interior of a home in Georgia, a plantation home. Look again, a mantelpiece mirror. These are objects of wealth. But not all mirrors are made of glass. Historically, some were stone, and they weren't all merely for gazing at self. The Mayans buried mirrors with the elite dead, believing them to be mystical devices for predicting the future. In Taoism, mirrors helped priests practice magic. And what is shown here, the obsidian mirror, the spirit mirror, actually traces its origins back to the Aztec culture, Mesoamerica, Mexico, all those areas. And one such obsidian mirror was used by the English polymath John Dee, whose interests ranged from astronomy, astrology, alchemy, and math. He was a court astrologer and scientific advisor to Elizabeth I. And he was one of the many people who advocated for exploration and the establishment of colonies. He later became extremely involved in divination and the occult, and he sought to talk to angels by using artifacts such as mirrors and crystals. So now one wonders, how does an European like that, if you call England Europe by then, how does an European get obsidian mirrors? Remember, colonization, Elizabeth is coming into power. The Armada portrait, she might have just defeated the Spanish Armada. So that means lots of piracy going on with Francis Drake. Spanish forces under the command of Hernan Cortes had conquered the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan in around 1521. And so had been shipping treasures, including obsidian mirrors, back to Europe. And chances are high, maybe one of the ships got pirated by the English, or maybe John Dee bought this from some someone in Europe. So this was the actual mirror that John Dee used. The reason I'm showing this, one message I want to give across, the world has always been global. So objects from America, South America, ended up in Tudor England, Tudor, Elizabeth I, similar timeframes. So those places were not isolated and insular. World has been global for a very long time. But if you look at the mirror itself, even now, I hope you can see, although it looks spectral, you can see the face of the archaeologist reflected onto the obsidian mirror. It still works really well. So from stone, we now go to bronze, because it's the bronze shield, almost like a mirror, that helped Perseus defeat Medusa by not having to look directly in her eye, lest he'd be turned to stone. What I found very amusing, if you take a close up, forgive me that it's a bit hazy, but you'll get the point. Even after she's been decapitated, Perseus is afraid to look at her directly in the eye, and he chooses instead to look at the reflection on his bronze shield's mirror-like appearance. Boy, Perseus. It might surprise you to learn that even as recently as the 1960s, there were tribes who had never seen their reflection. The Biami people of New Guinea freaked out when they first saw pictures of themselves and heard their own voices played back to them through tape recordings, or they saw photographs, or they saw themselves in the mirror. They covered their mouths and ducked their heads. They were frightened. They thought their spirits were going away. However, that trauma didn't last long. I love the human spirit. Anthropologists reported that within a matter of days, they were grooming themselves in front of the mirror, taking pictures of each other, wearing out the batteries on the anthropologists' tape recorders. They were beholding their self with a sense of wonder. That is exactly what a mirror is there for. It is not narcissism. It's pure happiness. Behold the curiosity on that face. Look at this and look at this. vanity has an absolutely different look. The mirror will reveal it. A mirror, as the story moves forward in time, reveals individuality. Because when you see your own self, you recognize uniqueness. Because in the olden days, when mirrors weren't so prevalent, community, the sense of belonging somewhere dominated. You want this individual thing. That is why medieval punishments, including banishment, because to be left alone, to be ostracized was horrible. Here it's all about individualism. I myself go out and become a hero. Back then, not true. Back then, if you didn't belong, who were you? So this presentation, again, is not going to delve into these societal areas of identity. We're not going to be doing any of that. Because who is it on display? Be it through these portraits, or if you're taking a selfie, because rest assured, even when you're taking a selfie, the camera has a mirror in there too. Technically speaking, there are mirrors in there to reverse the image. This 17-foot tall sculpture of a carnival mask made of mirrors is meant to remind the viewers of how little information mirrors actually provide, because you're masking yourself. Because what is the artist saying? The artist is trying to say that mirrors, like masks, only reveal what the wearer wants to reveal. So regarding identity, that applies also on a larger scale as us as a race, because astronomers turn their mirrors out towards space, introspecting. What is it that they're trying to find? What is it that they're trying to communicate? Who are we? What is our place in this universe? They want to find out, where are we located? It's all about location, identity, context. Mirrors get us there too. Mirrors also get us to places, because where would you be without side mirrors or rear view mirrors? Blind spots galore. Mirrors in the world of architecture. So Maraya means mirror in Arabic. And this Maraya is a land art architecture. It's located in Wadi Ashar, which is the northwestern Saudi Arabia province of Al Ula. These are the routes of the frankincense. And these are near also the volcanic freeways. And so this is actually a concert hall, and it's equipped with the latest theatrical and operatic sound systems. So these giant sheets of glass, these mirrors attached to the surface, reflect Al Ula's breathtaking landscape. So this 500-seat venue, look at that, is an uncommon and perhaps unnecessary incursion of man in the natural landscape. Now we go from the barren desert to the water-laden clouds. We Chicagoans call it the Bean. Officially, it's known as Cloudgate, mirroring the joy of the tourists and the Chicago skyline. And so from the clouds, we go to a cloudless sky of sunshine, or technically a place where the sun does not shine half the year. During the day, from I think late September to mid-March, this town, which is 3 hours northwest of Oslo in Norway, is dim. It's not dark, but it's dim. For half the year, the sun shines high up on the north wall of the valley above Rukjan. So the mountains prevent the sunlight from reaching the homes nestled in the valley below. How did they address this? Computer-aided giant mirrors correct this by reflecting light. You see, they reflect the light onto a spot in the middle of the town square. So they reflect light, but not heat. You cannot reflect heat. So you won't feel the warmth of the sun, but you will feel the light. You will sense the cheer. And it's good cheer. Look at that. The psychological benefits of light. Look, playing in the dark versus playing in the light. There is a difference. But it's also odd. People get used to the dark. You do not get depressed all the time. You will get used, you'll almost like it. So these three mirrors, in my mind, the gift of the modern three magi's is the gift of the sun, light divine. And few embody the grandeur of the splendidness of the sun, like the Sun King. France's longest ruling monarch, Louis XIV. He liked to be and earned the right to be called Louis le Grand because the Sun King had grand plans and he executed them. He doesn't have one of those aspirational goals. Such hogwash. He didn't have aspirational goals. If he had a goal, he met it. He had converted his father's hunting lodge into a spectacle. And in about 20 years, he added to it the now famous Hall of Mirrors, which was resplendent in light, both manufactured light, then candle, now electric, or natural light streaming through the windows. And that was actually the real purpose of these mirrors. They were not there for us to gape at ourselves or take selfies in front of it. The mirrors were there to reflect the outside light, thereby symbolically reflecting the majesty of the Catholic Sun King, Louis XIV. So Louis XIV's astute finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, managed to steal the closely guarded secret of mirror making from the Venetians. So mirrors are phenomenally expensive to make back then. Obviously, technology has improved. So before Louis XIV's time, Venetians practically had a monopoly. I'm skipping this because we covered most of this in the presentation about 2 years ago. Can you believe that? The topic was sand. But I would like to tell you, if you're in Chicago, or I don't know if they have it in all the Buccellati stores, but if you go to the Chicago Buccellati store, in the back, the display cases that you see there were originally from the pharmacies in Venice. These are the shelves in the pharmacy. And it's kind of cool because if you look at the bottom of the woods, you'll see it warped because when the floods came, the wood got warped. It's really lovely to see. And if you look closely, the original newspaper and silver backing of the mirrors is evident if you choose to look beyond these shiny baubles up front. So these silver back newspaper back are mirrors. You can see the reflection in there. In an act that we will now, by our standards, call the intellectual property right violation, the French acquired the secrets to glassmaking and put it to great use in Louis XIV's showpiece, Versailles. The French aristocracy followed suit, and the French mirror industry boomed and very quickly overshadowed the Venetians. Why is that? Because it's the fashion. He was the be all. If he had an Instagram, he'd probably have 1 billion followers. Whatever he did, people followed. Louis XIV is one of the sharpest minds, business minds you can think of. The mirrors reflected the glory of the outside world, the world outside his windows, both the sun and the gardens. Because those gardens are much more than perfectly manicured boxwoods. When those windows to the Hall of Mirrors opened, they reflected these bejeweled flower parterres. He, again, all these flowers, because they were promoting the horticulture industry of France, it is documented that sometimes when diplomats came and they came to meet the king, the flowers that were in their parterres in the morning, by the time they left, they had been changed. So imagine that. Try getting that done here. Good luck. The Sun King, Louis XIV, again an ever astute businessman, encouraged global trade, and he used Versailles to illustrate his grandness, to overwhelm people. Palace archives document ambassadors from Siam, place that we now call Thailand. And numismatics reveal the charming story how when the Thai delegate, the Siam delegate, came, they would not directly look at the king, for in their homeland, they never directly beheld their king out of reverence. And as one can see in this minting, Louis XIV had apparently stated, "You have traveled so far, you must gaze upon me." And he commanded them to look up. Effectively, behold splendor. Now, I wonder if that's how the Thai embassy perceived that move. But anyway, perspective. As evidenced by this carpet, France attempted trade not only with Siam, but China, because from China, they traded tea, porcelain, and many other goods. If you bother to look at this close up, what they were trying to give them then is hot chocolate. But the Chinese did not like the taste of hot chocolate. They already had a hot drink that they prefer. It's called tea. Anyway, so scroll paintings evidence that the Chinese emperor, well, this is not scroll painting, this was actually a painting on silk, I think. The Chinese emperors were curious about the French ruler because he had his own portrait. His own court painters had painted him by his commission, costumed as Louis XIV. Can you believe that? Scroll paintings from prior to that evidence that, China's had traditional bronze mirrors for a long time. In fact, bronze mirrors have been around in China for millennium. I'm going to divert our conversation for a second because I think people who attend here are curious. I'm going to point, please observe what this lady is sitting on because the symbolisms galore. Look at this thing that she's sitting on. It is, look, a root wood chair because in alignment with Taoist principles, natural, unprocessed wood is used to make this chair that would be placed not in the palace, not in the audience halls, but they would be placed in the imperial gardens. Art depicting the Taoist principles of non-action. That is what that chair is about. That chair is chock-a-block with symbolism and spirituality, in tune with the Taoist principles of the natural flow of things. They don't interrupt that. They don't try to bend it and make it to my liking. They're open enough to accept, open up their senses to what beauty can be. The Eastern mind is very different from the Western in matters of hierarchy, in matters of art. For example, gazing upon a ruler, and definitely in matters of love. But now we'll go back to the story of the mirror. And in terms of trade with foreigners, when China traded with the outside world, because China had tons to trade with, what they wanted in return, you barely had things they wanted. The only thing that they mainly wanted was silver. One of the very few other European items that interested them were large scale glass mirrors. Eventually, the Chinese imperial workshop started making their own. But in the beginning, because they were so exotic, all things exotic are valuable, glass mirrors, even in China, communicated wealth. And this painting is that of a wedding trousseau, and it gives pride of place. I'm going to zoom in now to the gift of two mirrors. I'm going to assume they weren't that big, exaggerations, but you get the point. Such European mirrors would have been mounted in ornamental frames, which had elaborate paintings in the back. So this would be on the back, and here's where the mirror would be. Now look close up. Look at the carvings on the mirror. Isn't that something? They take the European plain mirror, ornament it. So when we look now, the painting on the left is that of the emperor, and we know he's the emperor because he has a dragon in the backdrop. Only the emperor would be able to use the symbolism of a dragon in his house. And so behind this would have originally been another painting. Once Europe came in with mirrors, they replaced the painting with a mirror, which was another luxury item because the painting would have been a luxury item too. But now the higher luxury item in this case would be a mirror. So from China, so we're looking at the same time period. So this is the late 17th, early 18th century. Trade is flourishing in India as well. And her version and purpose of a mirrored hall was singular. So these dados, similar to the ones found in the mausoleum Taj Mahal, in this case, unlike Taj Mahal, which were enameled, in this case, the dados were studded with mirrors. And so were the molded gilding all across the place. So in the morning and the afternoon light, the ceilings and the walls glistened like faceted diamonds. And at night, the ricocheting light of a single candle illuminated the room. And that idea has inspired countless restaurants in India. You will find them when you go to Rajasthan and many other places. Mirrored clothing in India. Why? So that the lover sees herself on her beloved, and vice versa, including the bedspreads. But the spirituality that is India has metaphorical use of mirrors, and we're going to step into that region. So Indian temples reflect their geography. Southern temples, there's a huge diversity, and the spectrum is largely, although it's not very obvious, but it's largely dependent on the climate. If there is rain, if it's dry, affects the architecture of the temple. Obviously, pyramidal ones are to counter the rains. I am partial to cave temples, and these are found throughout India, and I gravitate towards them for their solemnity. The ones in Kerala, the temples in Kerala, do you see how different this is? Often have beautifully ornamented woodwork. And what's also interesting to me are the roofs often resemble shapes of boat, because Kerala, the backwaters of Kerala, all the rivers that are in there, the divinity in temples in many different sizes and shapes. And sometimes the temple has nothing but the statue, in this case, Ganesh. These are found throughout the country. The more easily recognizable ones, and the reason they are recognizable is because they are ornamented with sensuality. So it gets more eyeballs, right? But that sensuality is depicting the sacredness of creation. The female power of creativity adorns the walls, sinuous, frolicking with an insouciance that brought to my mind Lalique statue Susanna. You know, if you look at the two of them, look at them reveling in their sensuality. Because if you spied upon their naked splendor, because I'm assuming this Susanna is Susanna of the elders and not Lalique's daughter Susanna, why would anyone think that? Why would a father depict his daughter naked like this? I don't understand people. But the characters here are showing, if you probably viewed them in their naked splendor, these two are likely to purr and say, yes, admire me, what's not to love? I love it. But the sacredness of this sensuality that is acknowledged in Hinduism has a purpose. To charm the senses is part of our scriptures. And there's a term for it. It's called alamkar, which means to adorn. In India, everything is adorned, even the phones, even the trucks. They might be garish to you by our tastes, but it's adorned. Everything is adorned and ornamented in India, including the gods and goddesses. Statues in various stages of adornment show up everywhere. And this is a very common motif. Admiring herself in a mirror shows up all the time, because you would have to, if you want to look pretty, you want to know what you're looking like. Such forms, you know, you can see them everywhere, are found in, even in the nondescript, you know, by the side temples that dot the Indian landscape. No one bats an eye twice. For our presentation, we are going to focus in the South Indian region of Kerala, specifically in a place of Kerala called Aranmula. I think you like it. So the 16th, look at the roof and look, temple, elephants coming out with the blessings. So this is the 16th century. 400 years ago, this temple was made, wooden structure, beautiful. Parthasarathi temple. Parthasarathi is the name for Krishna. So at this temple, when these elephants walk down the stairs, it leads to the Pampa River flowing right in front of the temple. Why? Because that's where they will have the annual boat races. And those boat races, it's in September, are something to behold. Regional customs in India are fabulous because, for example, all the boats will have their specific boat race songs. It's really lovely. But the reason for the inclusion in this story is this part of Kerala has matrilineal traditions. And so in part of the trousseau, the bride is given 8 auspicious items, one of them being a mirror. That mirror would be commissioned. The mirror mold would be made with local clay. 2 flat discs would be made of clay, and they would be polished with charcoal, because the charcoal will smooth the final product, and the charcoal also absorbs the gases during the furnace process. Tiny spacers would be added in between the 2 charcoal discs, because that space in between, that little gap, would be the thickness of the eventual mirror. And they will also place a tiny little pipe through which the molten alloy would seep into and fill up the gap to make a mirror. This is then encased in clay. So everything natural. A crucible is molded on the end and flattened out. And again, as they thin the crucible top area out, they make a hole so the gas can escape, because if there's gas left in there, the final product will be brittle. This object is hardened by fire. And then high tin bronze alloy is put into the crucible. And then that crucible is sealed with paper, linen, and finally clay. So they seal all this up. And it is now placed inside the kiln. So you can see here is the mold of the mirror, the crucible into which the alloy is put. You put this upside down into the fire. So it heats up the metal in there. Once that is coming up, and imagine this, look at them, they're not wearing any protective gear. In this fire, because he's raising the fire up, oxygenating it, because you will need the fire to be extremely high to get the right melting temperature. And it's documented melting temperatures of about 750 degrees for this alloy to start melting, which will then pour into, because it will be turned back upside down. Why am I showing you this? This is pure science. This is not mere art. Without the right temperature, the metal wouldn't cure, the end product would be brittle and it would break. And in the reference, I've included something called Encyclopedia of Non-Western Science. I included it to show, there is science around the world. Just because people aren't wearing white lab coats or are in expensive universities doesn't mean there's not science going on. There's tons of science that's been around traditionally. So once out of the fire, so this is all melted, they turn it upside down, so it flows back into the mold. It lets it cool, and then they break this top mold, and eventually out between the two flat discs comes this metal. The metal is examined, so they're going to examine it, and if it passes inspection, they will adhere this to a wooden block. They will adhere it over a flame with a resin, so it sticks there. And it is now, these things are ready to be polished. They are polished on this jute cloth with oil. That's all they use. So this is low cost, low tech, time-tested tradition. But what I want to show you is, can you see that these methods were used in ancient times? Horsla ladies back then, almost a millennia, they have used the same technique. And there's a woman showing, like, this is how probably they used, because even today, from way in history to now, countless women have held a mirror, probably like this in their hand, put vermilion, the red color they put to depict that they are married, to put jewelry in their hair, to put flower in their hair. And they still do this constantly throughout the villages, throughout in the cities, definitely during marriage ceremonies, during weddings and all celebration, adornment. They do it with pleasure, for their own pleasure. Specifically for this region, for the Nair clans, that metal mirror will now be traced to be fit into this brass iron holding case. And so you need great skill to carve this out correctly, to file it down so it doesn't break. And so then they will fit it into this brass frame. So you see, they will fit this. This takes over 2 or 3 days. And once done, there is absolute clarity in the mirror. And so the past comes alive. This is how those mirrors were made. Seeing is believing. And so now we're getting to the real mirror, what we waited to get to. As mentioned before, there are temples galore in India. While I narrate the rest of the little story, I will show temples just for illustrative purpose. But no, because some temples cannot be photographed. There is a small village temple in India. And inside that innermost chamber, there is no sacred image. When the devotee goes in, all that hangs in there is a mirror. The devotee enters the somewhat dark and secluded chamber and sees only himself or herself, because that mirror becomes an invitation to not to look at, but to reflect upon oneself, just like you see here, to discover the divinity that resides within, to really look inside. Because I found that similar concept in Harry Potter, because there are tons of mirror in the Harry Potter stories. One of the Harry Potter stories is the story of the mirror of Erised. So in the story, we can almost call it myth. That's how things become myth. You tell a story over and over and over, it'll become mythology. So in the story by J.K. Rowling, when one stood in front of the mirror of Erised revealed what the heart desired. And what would the orphan Harry desire most? His family, his parents. But cunningly, the mirror simply reveals it does not grant. And now look, the word, the mirror image of the word Erised is desire. Desire. Because the happiest and most satisfied person in the world would look in that mirror and see a reflection of themselves exactly as they were, for they would then have no one and nothing more to desire for, to yearn for. There is nothing in the world that person would want to see. There was nothing that the mirror could show them. So the mirror would only reveal what is left. The only thing that matters, the mirror would reveal themselves. Beauty inside out, self-contained, abiding love, absolute divinity. Is that not what Narcissus saw? Absolute love, a completion. I hope the story resonates. And as always, thank you for your time. I'm going to stop sharing and I wish you joy.